これが弱い4歳にして知った社会の現実。
My Hero Academia. Nowadays, when people hear the name of that show, their knee-jerk reaction might be to cringe or act grossed out. The community hasn't exactly done wonders for the series' reputation, and it's very easy to find yourself associating the two, despite the fact that they're completely separate. However, with My Hero Academia reaching its conclusion, I believe there's no better time than now to truly reflect and look over the show. And when you really do that, what you find is a genuine piece of art staring right back at you. A masterclass in world building, character development, and storytelling. A generational series that has rightfully captivated millions. Let's talk about what made My Hero Academia so great. Released in the ancient year of 2016, bro, how has it been 8 years since 2016? My Hero Academia spread quickly through the generation's youth, entering the minds of every teenager who dreamt of having superpowers or living a more thrilling life. It had everything a shonen story needed to blow up. A main character who never gave up on their dream, a rugged mentor character who always made the audience feel safe, and some seriously intimidating villains who could strike genuine fear into the audience. Even Shigaraki in his infancy state seemed like a genuine threat, even though he was still in his incel League of Legends arc back then. When I look back at the first 3 seasons of My Hero Academia, I'm honestly filled with an overwhelming amount of nostalgia. It's right before the series takes a darker tone, but regardless, I think these seasons are my personal favorite. Back when Deku couldn't handle One for All, and All Might was still a safety net in the series. Things have changed a hell of a lot since then, maybe not for the worse, maybe even for the better. There are many ways Horikoshi captivates his audience, from the depths of the power system to the spectacle of his world building. But what I want to focus on first is what makes My Hero Academia's writing so engaging. I think nowadays people have a bit of a strange obsession with darker stories. So much so that if characters aren't constantly dying or getting traumatized, they think a story isn't as good. But that's definitely not true, as a story's quality isn't defined by its tone, it's defined by its writing and how well that fits its setting. And for a superhero world set on the backdrop of a school, Horikoshi writes pretty damn good. For example, many authors seem to get obsessed with making their teenage characters not actually behave like teenagers. Maybe it's because their world is too dark or they have to be mature, but you get many such cases where characters who are meant to be extremely young hardly act their age. My Hero Academia isn't like this. The characters actually behave like teenagers, and I think that's why it's so easy for so many people to get attached to their more humane personalities. For those experiencing the show during their school years, it's like getting a more interesting reflection of their lives. And for people experiencing the show past their school days, it's like getting a nostalgic reminder of your youth. Moments like the sports festival and school festival do a great job in humanizing these characters and letting teenagers actually live teenager lives. And even on an individual basis, the character writing in My Hero Academia is honestly phenomenal. Unlike other stories which may rush progression, characters in MHA are often developed both well and realistically, allowing for some of the best narrative payoffs I've seen in any series. Endeavor might honestly be one of my favorite written characters in any of the stories I've read. A man who starts off as spiteful and bitter, so desperate to reach the #1 spot that he throws his entire life away. But that's still not good enough, so rather than trying through himself, he forces that burden onto his children. And so you get characters like Todoroki, who had to learn to embrace himself due to the hatred he felt towards his father through abusing both him and his family, eventually allowing himself to live and define his own path. And spoiler for the latest season, characters like Toya, aka Dabi, who allowed that spite and bitterness towards his father to fester due to never gaining his attention and doing anything to crush his father's legacy just to get back at him. Endeavor has to go through a long journey of self-realization, improvement, and eventually amendment. But even then, there are members of his family who will never accept him for what he has done, and that's both touching and realistic. Still, despite the fact that his family may never accept him, Endeavor still strives to atone for his sins. Thus, his hero name perfectly encapsulates his character. First, a never-ending endeavor to become the #1 hero, and then when he reached that position, a never-ending endeavor to seek atonement for what he had done. There are countless more phenomenally written characters I could go over, whether it be All Might, Aizawa, or even Bakugo. Yes, Bakugo. But before I cover some of the villains, let's talk about the world. My Hero Academia asks an interesting question. How does the world react when something as moralistic as heroism is pushed into the capitalist workforce? Being a hero goes from being a moral aspiration to a career goal, and from the very start of the series, we see characters more interested in fame and success than honest heroism. In reaction to this perversion of what it means to be a hero, we get extremists like Stain, the hero killer, who believes there is something fundamentally wrong with how hero society is run, and goes as far as killing heroes to set things right. And aside from just heroism in of itself, what's even more interesting is how the affliction of superpowers, called quirks or meta abilities in the series, have impacted society. Those without quirks are seemingly mistreated in life, with our main character, Midoriya, beginning the series realizing that he will never have the heroic potential that his classmates do. Though I do have to admit, the quirkless aspect of society is something Horikoshi definitely could have expanded on a bit. From these concepts, we're presented with all sorts of interesting ideas, like quirk marriages, where people selectively breed to produce the greatest powers, which is the real-world equivalent to something I probably can't mention in this YouTube video, or the Meta Liberation Front, which is a terrorist organization determined to allow the free use of quirks. But one of the most interesting effects that hero and quirk society produces is that of its villains. At times, the quirks people receive from birth may affect their personalities, and one has to wonder to what extent is someone truly evil or simply someone who never got the chance to receive help. Those who never received the support they needed ended up becoming the villains in this world. Toga, whose quirk made her view love differently, never received the support she needed and strayed onto a darker path because of it. Twice, burdened with both guilt and misery due to the horrible psychological effects of his quirk, chose a life surrounded by the people who thought understood him, who just so happened to be villains. Spinner was a mutant who was treated harshly just because of his appearance, and chose a life of extremism to fight back against a society that rejected him. The ultimate culmination of this idea is of course in Shigaraki, who never received the care he needed when he was at his lowest, and as such, blamed the world and was determined to destroy all of it in revenge. A core theme in the series is how villains are not born evil, they are made evil, and so the dynamic between heroes and villains goes beyond the stereotypical right and wrong, but more so turns into the dynamic of hero society and its consequences. Quick spoiler warning for the end of the manga here, so skip to this part if you don't want them. Why did they make All for One the final confrontation? That really annoyed me. Shigaraki had so much more going for him and was genuinely just so much more interesting. All for One is the only villain in this series who is just generically evil, like he was genuinely a prick since birth, and for him to end being the villain is just... It definitely doesn't ruin the series. This isn't an Attack on Titan moment, but it was a letdown. Anyway, let's talk about the power system. My Hero Academia's power system, while not as complex as some of its contemporaries, only adds on to what makes this series so good. The basic summary is this. About 80% of the population is capable of using a superhuman ability called a quirk. There are emitter quirks that allow the user to generate and possibly control certain things or alter existing things around them in certain ways. There are transformation quirks that cause the user to take on a temporary alteration of some kind. And then there are mutant quirks that cause the user a permanent abnormality directly related to their power. Quirks are usually inherited, though in rare cases, mutations may occur, giving birth to a completely new power. And that's pretty much it, but despite its simplicity, Horikoshi has been capable of creating so many enthralling fights and events just from it. Quirks are generally some of the most creatively used abilities in all of shonen, from Bakugo turning himself into a literal torpedo, to Todoroki hypercooling the air around him before rapidly expanding it using heat to create an explosion, even to Deku going through his fingers like ammo to use his quirk that destroys his body. It's all very thrilling to watch. Outside of just the power system though, the choreography and spectacle that Horikoshi puts on display on a weekly basis is absolutely phenomenal. This man is a weekly shonen artist, and despite this, produces some of the most amazing art and panel design I've ever seen. Yes, he made this on a weekly basis. I don't know if you understand, but this is generational talent. But let me talk a bit about how My Hero Academia resonated with me, personally. I got into My Hero Academia at an interesting point of my life. I think I was about 12, maybe 13 when I watched the first episode, a lot later than the premiere, maybe even a year later, and it certainly wasn't my first anime, but it didn't take me long to realize that I loved it. Going through the episodes, you can't help but root for Deku on his journey to overcome impossible odds and reach that #1 spot. Besides this, the fights were consistently breathtaking, the soundtrack was memorable, and overall the direction was spectacular. But what truly sits as a core memory in my head will always be the battle between Deku and Todoroki in the semi-finals of the sports festival. A lot of emotion and stakes had been building up to this fight, and as we reach the climax, the music crescendos, the animation really kicks in, and all that payoff you've been waiting for hits you all at once. Without a doubt, this is one of my favorite moments in any piece of fiction I've ever consumed, and will always hold a special place in my heart. And I found myself so enthralled in the world that I'd spend my classes drawing up My Hero Academia characters with their own quirks and backstories. Not to be Bakugo's best friend or anything parasocial like that, but just to think of what kind of abilities I could add into the setting. I got a drawing tablet to start making them digitally, and even found myself in Discord servers, making characters and writing out stories with other people. I genuinely believe that, if not for how much making my own characters made me realize how much I love creative works, I would have never have learned to write stories, make art, design games, or maybe even become a YouTuber. So thank you, Horikoshi. Thank you very much. A lot of people get caught up in the more embarrassing and shameful sides of the community, but if you peel all of that back, what you'll find is a truly spectacular piece of art. So if you haven't watched the series, give it a chance, because I guarantee you it will blow you away. Thank you for watching the video. If you like my content, subscribe right now. And if you liked the video, feel free to drop a like and a comment about what you liked about the series. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.